Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 108 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Christian, and as always, I'm joined by my killer co-host, Colton. How are you doing tonight, Colton?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself, Christian?
Doing pretty well, thank you. Before we get too far into this episode, just wanted to remind everyone that Common Knowledge and all of the podcasts on the Constructive Criticism Network are sponsored by puremtgo.com. If you guys wanted to support the show, you can make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Constructive Criticism YouTube channel, and check out our Patreon. With all that out of the way, let's get on to the podcast for the week. So normally, we start things off just sort of talking about what decks we've been playing. This week, I haven't had much time to play leagues and stuff. I did play in a Pauper Challenge. Of course, I played Golgari Aristocrats because that's sort of like the budget deck that we've been working on. I tuned my list to beat Burn. Unfortunately, though, I was still like a pretty quick out in the event because early on I played against Tron twice, and that matchup seems very, very difficult. What about yourself?
Yeah, I've been on Aristocrats as well. I haven't had much time to play leagues, so I've been mostly just been playing in the practice rooms for this past week. I think I have probably like 55-ish of the 60 pretty well set, and it's mostly just been trying to figure out what's good sideboard cards right now with some of the recent changes to the meta with the bans and people trying different decks and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, have you found any sideboard cards that maybe you want to sneak in there but haven't been able to test yet or anything like that?
Not really, not yet. I've just been trying different ways, especially against Tron, to try to like figure out more ways just to try to disrupt them to get in that damage, because Aristocrats is primarily, like, I would say it's a more aggro-y deck with some combo stuff, but it doesn't have like massive huge swings as often like Elves does or stuff like that. So it can't always race Tron, but yeah, that's what I've been trying to figure out is what do I want primarily to beat Tron in some of the control decks in the format.
Yeah, how many Duress were you playing? Because I, during the challenge, only had 2 in my sideboard, and I felt like I wanted like maybe 3 or 4. But that could also just be because I ended up playing against control decks quite a bit early on in the event.
I've been trying 3. The issue with Duress is that like your mana is a little clunky in the deck, I feel like. And sometimes like Duress on turn 1 as opposed to applying pressure on turn 1 isn't always where you want to be. And it doesn't always hit the right piece, sadly, against Tron. So I've been trying 3. I think it needs something else besides just Duress, but I haven't found out what it is yet.
I could see that. I had seen like a lot of like the older list playing like Contaminated Ground, and I was wondering if that could be good in the matchup, but I didn't like have it in my sideboard or test it out or anything like that. That's just more like theory crafting, I think.
Yeah, I haven't tried that card out either, but it'd be a good one to try for sure.
Yeah. So I guess with that out of the way, we can get on to our main topic for the week. And of course, Zendikar Rising was fully spoiled. So you and I had sort of went through the set, and we had picked out some cards that we liked, as well as had like some general thoughts on it. What did you think of like the set overall?
I thought it was interesting. It looks good, but not super busted. The set feels like it's more of I call it like a Jund set, where it feels more grindy and mid-rangey as opposed to some of the other sets. And it has a lot of mechanics that are there to help avoid flooding and really encourage you to to build your board as opposed to just like do, I don't know, so some like Ikoria was all about trying to like mutate one dude and do all these crazy things, and or play humans and non-humans, and it feels a little bit more of like a, it does feel kind of like a D&D set, but it feels very, very like a mid-range set, if that makes sense. It doesn't feel like a very, very busted combo set or anything like that. It doesn't have anything that comes off as insanely busted.
Yeah, for sure. That was sort of like my thinking, was that like it looks like a great set. It specifically for Pauper doesn't look like it has like this insanely high power level, but it does have a few strong cards or a few like playable sideboard cards and stuff. So I am excited about that just for this format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen people already playing 0 land decks with this, so we will see how that goes. People are trying are trying Spy in formats outside of Pauper now, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, the like lands from the set are probably my favorite part. If that was like an evergreen thing, and granted, this is like without playing with them yet, but if that was like an evergreen thing and they did it right, I think it would be incredibly good for the game.
Yeah, people always complain about flooding out or not drawing enough lands in Magic. That's been like one of the biggest complaints in this game for the past 27 years, and something that a lot of other games have, like Hearthstone and Force of Will, have tried to essentially get rid of in a lot of ways. But we will see if those types of land/spells actually work well for Magic.
Yeah, I definitely hope that they do. But anyway, so I think that we both had like a list of top 5s. I figured what we could do is we could just sort of start at the bottom of our list at number 5, and we can each trade off until we each speak about all of our cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my number 5 card for Pauper that I had was Akum Hellhound. It's basically just a color shifted step links for those that don't know what it does. So it costs a red, and it's a 0/1, and it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +2/+2. I'm not sure that this card's going to be like super good in Pauper or even good at all, but I really hope so, because I've always really liked this effect. And honestly, like if this could see play in some sort of red deck, I think it would be a lot of fun to play, and I would definitely play it.
Yeah, we do have, Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds as a way to get 2 landfall triggers on this card. The issue I see is that, the lands that are tapped, and you're typically playing these in a more aggressive deck. So I think seeing like a mid-range zoo deck would be pretty interesting. One that kind of pushed for game around like turn 5, turn 6, somewhere in there. I think that would be a really cool deck to see.
Yeah. That was sort of like my thinking about it, specifically about the like it would probably have to be like a mid-rangier deck, because like if you wanted to play like this plus step links or whatever, like the way to make those cards really good is with like Terramorphic Expanse and stuff. And if you're playing an aggro deck, you don't want to play Terramorphic Expanse on turn 1, obviously. So.
No, that card's not very good in aggro decks.
Yeah, I hear. What about you? What was your like 5th best card, or 5th like the card that you were most excited about?
So mine was the Skyclave Pickaxe, the landfall 1 green equipment. I think this card could see play in a blue-green Infect Shell, because it does have the potential to give your dude the +4/+4. And you can actually... Infect is a deck where you can probably play a couple of those fetch lands, but I'm just not really sure how great it's going to be in those decks, but I think it would be an interesting card to try.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this card basically turns all of your creatures into step links. So that's very exciting. Yeah, and then, so my number 4 card was a card called Spare Supplies. It's a 2-mana artifact that enters battlefield tapped, and whenever it enters battlefield, you draw a card, and you pay 2 mana, tap and sacrifice it. You can draw another card. That one I feel is pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I sort of expect this to see play in like like the like more aggressively slanted like mid-rangier decks. So decks that might play like Alchemist Vial or like some of like the eggs could play this instead. I'm not sure if this actually beats out those cards. I think that there are some times where drawing 2 cards will be more important than maybe making their creature not be able to block or fixing your mana. And there are other metas where the extra card just isn't as important as the effect, so I think it definitely depends. But I do think that this card could see a fair bit of play.
Yeah, I think this is good when strictly the Boros Monarch deck is pretty good. And it's also not a terrible choice in some affinity lists, because it can give you card advantage later on in the game when you run out of gas. And that is a problem that the deck does have sometimes. So yeah, it's a neat little egg.
Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty unexciting, but I do think it'll be just another really good option for any deck that wants to play eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your number 4 card?
So my number 4 card is Fisher Wizard. And this card, if I can pull it up real quick, is a 2 mana, it's a 1 and a red, 2/1, that lets you cycle away a card, pretty much, and draw a new one. And I think this card could see play. It's not super aggressively costed, but it could see play in mono red or red X style aggro decks, just as a way to help you either cycle away extra lands or help you find that third land drop that your deck sometimes really struggles to find. And just having like a pretty easy 2/1 body that can get in some damage or block for you and get rid of a card out of your hand that you don't really want for a different card seems pretty decent to me.
Yeah, for sure. I don't disagree. The one thing that I will say about this card, though, that sort of makes me like hesitant to say that like it's like super playable, is just because I feel like the like aggressively slanted red decks are like they're already so packed full of like incredibly good cards. I just couldn't imagine like what it would be beating out.
I could see this in like a bushwhacker style deck more than like a burn deck. Just as something that can like help you dig to find you, because in Pauper there's only one bushwhacker. So just another way to help you find your bushwhacker and get another body on board seems not terrible to me.
Yeah, for sure. They could probably honestly be played over like maybe like a goblin heel cutter or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even like you could play 2 of these over like 2 of the Valley Dasher, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. But that's where I see this card going.
Yeah. So then, actually, it looks like we mostly agreed for our top 3. So if you wanted to introduce what both of our number 3 card was.
So our number 3 card is Feed the Swarm. Feed the Swarm. Let me pull it up again real quick because I had it on my phone and I just need to pull up the page again. So Feed the Swarm is 1 in a black sorcery, and it destroys a target creature or enchantment your opponent controls, and you lose life equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. So this is enchantment removal in black.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really excited to play this card, especially in the like mono black control deck, something like that. What we've seen in the past week is that the like freed from the real defender deck has sort of like picked up steam again, and I think while this card is a sorcery, if they like just leave their free from the real stranded preparing to go off the next turn, you might be able to surprise them with this and remove it.
Mm-hmm.
And it still has that value of being just a creature removal spell. So I think this could see some play, especially like if Boggles picks up in popularity, something like that.
Yeah, I think this card is pretty good. I just be very careful with this card, especially in a format right now where we see a lot of Gurmag anglers. This is definitely not a main deck card. When when your opponent's two main threats are a 5-mana 2/2 and a 7-mana 5/5, this card is not good against those cards.
That's true.
Taking
I don't
7
know,
to kill a
will
Gurmag
say-
Angler does not seem really that great, especially in decks where you tend to hurt yourself.
That's true. I will say another thing that I think this card sort of has going against it is that this mana cost, black and 1, is such a competitive mana cost in Pauper. Really, it's competitive mana cost everywhere, but like we have Cast Down and Chainer's Edict and Echoing Decay, and like we just have like so many cards that
Insert
do
X
similar
Doomblade
things.
here, pretty much.
Yeah, and I think this one being a sorcery actually like is sort of a big deal, and it sort of goes against this card a fair bit.
Yeah, I feel like this is a side deck card most of the time, and a main deck card when enchantments are a real problem for mono black decks.
I agree.
This is also a pretty cheap way in your Gurmag Angler deck to get your Gurmag Angler back from a Journey to Nowhere against the white decks as well.
That's true. I actually like didn't even think about it in that context, and that makes me a little bit more excited to play it for sure.
Yeah, against some of those Boros and those mono white decks that kind of have to use their Journey to Nowheres to get rid of your Gurmag Angler, this is a pretty easy way to get your Gurmag Angler back.
Yeah. As it turns out, we also agreed on what card that we had at number 2. I'll go ahead and introduce it real fast. We had both agreed that a card called Deliberate, pretty much it's preordained for 2 mana. It costs a blue and a generic, and it's just preordained, but it is an instant. This is a card that I think is like whenever those like really instance matter decks like the Bud Teaching decks or something, whenever those sort of like rotate to be back into favor in Pauper, I think that this card could see a fair bit of play even over like Accumulated Knowledge or something, just because Preordain, like that's such a powerful effect, just try to draw a card. And I think having it be an instant in those decks makes it pretty playable.
Yeah, the only thing that I really like this card, the only thing going against it is competing with Impulse in that 2 mana slot. So it's this card I feel like is really dependent on how much do you value the Scry versus how much do you value digging for one specific card. Because Impulse does get you one card more deep, but at the same time you're also putting the other 3 on the bottom.
Yeah, sure. What you might actually end up seeing about this card is that like it just has that like weird one-of spot in Tron decks where it's like you could play literally any like selection or card advantage card in this spot, and this just happens to be the one that Tron pilots play. It's honestly probably the most likely end result for it, but I'll definitely be trying it out in a bunch of different blue shells.
Yeah, this card seems pretty fun to play in like a teaching style deck for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then our number 1 card. I really don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone. Do you want to introduce it, Colton?
Yep, let me pull it up again real quick so I don't mess up what it actually says. Alright, so the card, of course, is Cleansing Wildfire. It's 1 in a red for a sorcery. Destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle their library, draw a card. This card is bonkers. This card is great. I love this card. Thank you, Wizards. 2 mana Stone Rain that cycles. What the heck? I mean, I was hoping for Ghost Quarter, but this is fine. I'll take this.
The only thing that I have to say about this card is wow.
Wow, F-Tron.
Yeah. The this card, like at the 2 converted mana cost, I think is very powerful. The fact that it cantrips is what really makes it pretty good to me. One of the issues in the like style of decks that I'm imagining playing this is going to be in the like Jeskai control deck maybe, or like one of the like blue-red fairies decks is like a card like this might not have seen play if it didn't say draw a card, but the fact that it also cycles means that whenever you bring this in your sideboard, even if it like is too late to destroy that land, like it would, like it won't be like as good. At least it still digs you a card deeper. So this is honestly just like an all-around great addition to Pauper. I'm very excited to play with it. I'm very excited to side it in.
Yeah, and another upside to this card is just because of the fact that this card exists. I know previously a lot of Tron lists played 0 basic lands, and I've started seeing more and more Tron players be forced to play basic islands or basic forests, because if they're not careful, this just turns into 2-mana strip mine, draw a card. And so just the fact that it exists and it is around in some ways has hurt Tron's ability to get free colors, because they now have to play more basics, and that slows down their game plan a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this card is going to alter the metagame in maybe subtle ways, but important ones. Like we have seen Tron sort of stay dominant and probably be the best deck in Pauper for a while. So any tools meant to fight that is fine by me.
Mm-hmm. I just kind of see this as what I like to call the Field of Ruin effect. What happened when Field of Ruin first entered the modern format, where it was primarily played in blue-white control decks that also played Path to Exile. So it wasn't uncommon to see people have to, take three to four basic lands out of their deck and plop them on the battlefield. And a lot of modern decks for a long time didn't play that many basic lands. Some decks were just strictly playing colors off of dual lands. So it really it shifted the way that people built their mana bases there, and I think it's going to have the same effect on decks like Tron that rely on a lot of non-basic lands in the Pauper format.
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty excited to play this card. It does appear to be just like a sideboard card, at least for now. But I think that's perfectly fine. It's very valuable in that role.
Yeah, against a lot of decks, this card does literal nothing, because most Pauper decks are full of basic lands. And so, I mean, you can probably hit a bounce land, and that's like, you're taking them off of a mana, I guess. But is it really worth like the 2 mana to do that? It's just kind of, one of those things that it will see played to hit hit bounce signs when those people play too many of those and they get greedy, and it will also just be used to hit on Tron.
Yeah, for sure. And that is our top cards. I will say, just sort of to go over it, that I'm actually pretty excited for the set. I'm pretty pleased with the additions that have been made to Pauper. I think that a lot of the cards are either pretty good sideboard options as far as like the ones that I think are powerful, or they're cards that have a lot of competition at those slots and are still good enough to maybe see play, but nothing just seems so like outrageously busted to me. And I appreciate that a lot of card games seems incredibly hard, and it's nice to see things that I, at least for now, think they have gotten right. And who knows, maybe like 2 months from now, like there will be a card that like I just didn't realize how good it was that was busted, but I don't think that'll be the case this time around.
Yeah, I sure hope not. I hope we don't get another Oko situation for sure.
Right. All right, well, that is our main topic for the week. I guess now we can get into what sideboard cards we've been liking.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to start us off for that, Christian?
Yeah, my card has been Light of Hope. For those that don't know, Light of Hope is a 1 white instant. It has 3 modes. 1, puts a +1/+1 counter on a creature. Another one destroys target enchantment. And I think the other one gains, how much life does it gain? Either 3 or 4? Yeah, it's gained 4 life. So I like this card a lot. Obviously, in preparing for the challenge this past weekend, I had sort of like gotten my brain that like I needed cards that were good against aggro, and obviously our deck doesn't play white, but this was just another card that I like remembered was good against aggro decks. And then also sort of looking at the challenge results and seeing Freed from the Real start to make a strong comeback. A card that can also disrupt their combo, as well as, at worst case scenario, bolster one of your own creatures seems incredibly good in those like white aggro decks. So this is a card that I'm pretty excited to be playing in my sideboard if I have to.
Yeah, I've always been pretty high on this card. I think it's just a good like toolboxy card. It's not particularly great at any one thing, but it's good at a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
So, good pick. I like it.
Yeah, and what was your pick this week?
So mine was also not a green or a black card. Mine was a red card this week. And that's because I've been seeing a lot more folks playing Gurmag Anglers around with some of the new blue cards and all that sort of stuff. And so I picked Magmatic Sinkhole. So Magmatic Sinkhole is 5 and a red for an instant with Delve, and it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. You don't need to worry about that last part. It's just 5 damage to target creature. And the reason I picked this card is a lot of Red X aggro decks really struggle to get over a 4 or 5 toughness creature, such as Gurmag Angler or Hooting Mandrills, an elf that's gotten a little bit of a pump, stuff like that. And so in red-based decks that can dump a lot of stuff into the graveyard relatively quickly, or can go mid-game and have stuff in the yard, I think this card is a good option for those decks to help get rid of big problems for just sometimes 2 or 1 mana. So you can play this in Burn. I don't know if it's necessarily the best pick, but you can play it in Burn. I've seen it in particularly in those Jeskai Control and Jeskai Flicker lists, and it's also really good in my opinion. I think it's good in those Boros Monarch decks because you play cards like Faithless Looting that dump stuff into the yard, and you also have a lot of eggs that you're cracking and bouncing and stuff, so you tend to end up with some useless crap in the graveyard anyway. Mm-hmm. And so just as like a couple, like a 1 or 2 of, sometimes you want to get your stuff from the graveyard back, but sometimes it's just better just to have that last removal spell you need to get in those last couple points of damage.
Oh yeah, for sure, I agree. I think this card's pretty powerful. I will say that I think it's probably more effective in those control decks versus the like Boros Monarch deck. And the reason that I say that is because in the like Boros Monarch decks, there are some draws that are very reliant on utilizing all of your resources from the graveyard anyways. Mm-hmm. So I think that might constrain this card's potential in those style of decks. But I don't think it's bad by any means in those style of decks. No,
and in those style of decks, they can also generally have a little bit more mana to begin with anyways. You don't usually have to go all the way down to the 1 mana. You don't have to delve out 5 typically in that style of deck. When I've seen it played in those decks, I've seen it often cast for 3-4 mana, which isn't great, but in a deck that can often struggle with removing bigger threats, it's still totally fine.
Oh yeah, for sure. Alright, well, I suppose that'll do it for this week's episode of Common Knowledge. If you guys wanted to get in touch with us, you can find me on Twitter at JustKaiDad, or you can find Colton on Twitter at SnapBoltForAll, or you can just send us an email over to commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. If you guys had any questions on the Pauper format, MTGO, or anything else, you can either send us an email or leave a comment down below. Thank you again to our sponsor, PureMTGO.com, as well as the Constructed Criticism Network for allowing us to be a part of it. And last, but certainly not least, be good to each other. And thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.